And what does it do to us? What does it do to our youth? How to build a bomb in the United States public school system. Instill in the child there are no absolutes. Life is an accident. People are evolved animals. Millions of years of violence, killing, death, disease, pain, and suffering brought humans into existence. There is no God. The Bible is not true. Next, remove the Bible and prayer and 10 Commandments from the school. Then just stand back and wait. Tell a kid, well, you shouldn't kill anybody. Well, why? Who are you to tell me what I should do or shouldn't do? That's why you have Columbine and things like that. Because we're not instilling in kids the values, that the truth of the Bible, that God said, in the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth, that I'm the authority. So how do we defuse the bomb? Instill in the child there are absolutes. Life is a special creation by God. He formed us in our mother's womb. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. People are not evolved animals, no matter what line you think we came out of. Violence, killing, death, disease, pain, and suffering were brought into existence by man's sin. We brought death on this world by Adam bringing in sin into the world. We do it. God didn't bring sin into this world. The choices of man did. We need to bring back the Bible, prayer, and the 10 Commandments into schools and the culture. Watch and pray. We need to be praying for these things covered. And then when you tell a kid, oh, thou shalt not kill, they have a foundation to realize, oh yeah, that's right, because the Bible says so. There is a God, and He's in charge, and I better listen to Him. That's what we need to instill in kids. This is from an atheist back in the 80s talking about what we need to do in the public school systems to bring kids into our thinking. I am convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith. A religion of humanity that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach. Regardless of the educational level, preschool, daycare, or large state university, the classroom must and will become an area of conflict between the old and the new. The rotting corpse of Christianity, together with all its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism. John Dumphy, back in '83, from The Humanist, his book, A Religion for a New Age. That's the idea. That's what's going into our schools. That's 26 years ago. You don't think that's rampant in our schools? I know when I was in high school, I wasn't walking with the Lord, but I remember my science teacher telling me, you got to write the answers. You got to say the evolutionary stuff. And I was like, teacher, I don't care if you fail me. I'm not saying it's true. I don't care. Plus, I want to be lazy and not do my schoolwork. But I was like, I don't believe it. Evolution's a bunch of garbage. You got no proof. And we were like going round and round. He even called my dad. My dad stood up for me. We're believers. I'm not going to say that's true. It's a lie. But he was cramming it down my throat. People will laugh at your kids and ridicule them. We get maybe to show up with you on Sunday morning and get an hour or so with you. And then they go to school in the public school system, if you're sending them there, and they're getting this fed down their throat all the time. Not just in the science classroom, but in the humanistic worldview in every classroom, in every way that it's being taught. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some godly teachers. We've got some godly teachers here. But they'd probably admit to you there's a heavy liberal bias and there's a big anti-God movement through the schools to teach this. And what does it do ultimately to our faith? What does it ultimately say about what we believe? And what does it do for our worldview? Richard Bozarth, The Meaning of Evolution. It becomes clear now that the whole justification of Jesus' life and death is predicated on the existence of Adam and the forbidden fruit he and Eve ate. Without the original sin, who needs to be redeemed? Without Adam's fall into the life of constant sin terminated by death, what purpose is there to Christianity? None. If we don't have original sin, if it isn't what the Bible said in Romans when it says that through Adam came sin and through sin death, and therefore we all die, and then through Christ we can all live, if we don't have the first Adam, we can't have the last Adam. If they can destroy the foundation, they wipe everything else out. The building comes down. And that's their aim. That's back in 79. So the few things that are used in the church, and the things I'm going to cover really briefly here, the gap theory, day-age theory, theistic evolution, like I said, I won't spend a lot of time on them, when we don't have a lot of time, but also I'm going to tear apart the science of these a lot next week when we get in strictly into the science. Why no gap theory? It's also called the ruin reconstruction theory. It's way they cram evolution into the Bible. It's to say that God created this perfect earth in Genesis 1, and between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there was this wiping out of everything, this starting over, the earth became null and void, and He recreated everything. And that gave time for this pre-existent, this Satan-ruled earth before he fell, as Luciferian-ruled earth, this worldwide Luciferian flood that wiped out. And that's where we get our fossil record, and that's where we get all these issues. Why doesn't it work? Biblical problems. The Bible teaches 6 days of creation, and that's it. No recreation. And this applies to day age. This applies to the long progressive creationism as well. Exodus 20:11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that's in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Pretty clearly told. The Bible teaches no sin or death before Adam. Like I said, Romans 5. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. There could not have been anybody living before Adam and Eve, or anything living before Adam and Eve, to die and create this fossil record for millions of years before. Otherwise, the Bible's a lie. Romans doesn't make any sense. Death came through Adam's sin. There couldn't have been anything dying before Adam. And the evolutionists and even the progressive creationists will tell you, we find these fossils, and they were these pre-man existent hominids, and we find these animals, we see signs of cancer in them, and signs of decay and sin and disorder in them, in their fossils. And they try to say, well, see, this was happening before. They don't understand. They try to explain it away, but if you don't have no death before Adam, then you're destroying what the gospel is teaching us. And it denies Noah's worldwide flood. They have this Lucifer's flood I talked about. If they didn't have Noah's flood, if they had this worldwide flood with with Lucifer that wiped it out to recreate it, and that's where we got our fossil records, what did Noah's flood do? What would that worldwide flood do? You'll find out that most evolutionists and progressive creationists, especially, they don't believe in a worldwide flood. What else is wrong with the gap theory? It has grammatical problems. This is from Ken Ham. Isaiah 45:18, which Phil shared a couple weeks ago, often quoted by Gapists, is rendered in the KJV, He created not in vain, or tohu, the Hebrew word. He formed it to be inhabited. In the context, Isaiah is speaking about Israel, God's people, and His grace in restoring them. He didn't choose His people in order to destroy them, but to be their God and for them to be His people. Isaiah draws an analogy with God's purpose in creation. He didn't create the world for it to be empty. No, He created it to be formed and filled, a suitable abode for His creations. Gapists miss the point altogether when they argue that because Isaiah says God did not create the world tohu, or void, it must have become tohu at some later time. Isaiah 45:18 is about God's purpose in creating, not about the original state of the creation. God created the world to be inhabited. He made it for us to live on. That's what it's trying to say. That's the correlation. They're taking things out of context. And also, in Genesis 1:1 and between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, you can see they call it a wav or a vav disjunctive in the Hebrew word. As you're reading Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And it says, the world was without form and void. What it's going from Genesis 1:2 on is then explaining God creating the heavens and the earth. It's an explanation. It says, and thus is what it's more saying. In other words, and so, this is how He did it. It's not Genesis 1:1 and then millions of years in this big gap and the destruction, Lucifer's flood and all these fossil records, and all of a sudden He recreated in Genesis 1:2. No, it's saying, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Thus, He started with this, day one, and there's light. And moves on from there. It's explaining Genesis 1:1. It's elaborating Genesis 1:1. It's not sticking something in between there. And I read Genesis 1 all the way through 11, and I think anybody that does, you pick it up, it reads like, oh wow, He's saying day, one day, every day. Doesn't make sense. Another word that's kind of confusing, in Genesis 1:28, they try to use the word replenish. To say, oh, you see, God said replenish the earth, refill it. Well, that's only in our modern English. In the original Hebrew, that word means literally to fill. I don't know how to pronounce that little green squiggly thing. But the Hebrew word means to fill or to fill up. It doesn't necessarily mean to refill. In 1611, when the King James was written, it still meant, replenish meant to fill. Modern day translations now, we think of replenish to mean refill. It just meant to fill the earth. To go and to fill the earth, and to cover the earth. It didn't mean to refill the earth after a previous destruction.